Hey everybody, so this is Prospector Jess, hunting for gold, sourdoughminer.com. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how placer gold is dependent upon water speed, and specifically what you're going to be looking for when you're looking at placer gold and water traps or concentrators for gold, placer gold in particular. That's nuggets, coarse gold, fine gold, and flour. So what we're looking for here is variations in the speed and what it does to gold. As you can see, I have a picture here that shows kind of a slow, fast, and then slow section of the water flow. And the idea is that slow, fast, and slow section kind of indicates something that might happen to gold. Now, if you recall, over the last few months that I've been doing these, I keep emphasizing when you're looking at gold, it's the speed of the water flow and the size of the gold and the material that they're resting in that matters. Everything else doesn't count. So if that flow is very high speed, it can carry heavier gold. If that speed starts to drop, the gold settles out rapidly and drops to the bottom. And then if the flow doesn't go above a certain stall point, if you will, like an airplane, boom, it sticks and then starts to concentrate. The funny part is, several funny parts, but one of the funny parts here is that the gold itself will tend to find other particles of gold because they have the same sticking property. In other words, they will tend to collect together. So you'll end up with places where the water has been slowing down, where it first slows down, like up in here, and then it speeds up and then starts to slow again down in here. Those areas will tend to be places where gold will tend to trap out. The fast spots, the gold will tend to pick up speed and move downstream. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for here. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time tonight. It's going to be a quick one, and give you a couple tips on what you're looking for, because that's the important part of gold, and placer gold in particular, and water speed and the relationship. So let me check to make sure I've got you guys on and our audio is good. You know, we've had a little bit of a Murphyism over the last few weeks with audio. It looks to me like I've got it working here, so I want to make sure you guys see it and it's working. Hey, we've got 26 people right now. Let's check the comments and see what we've got. The comments say 5, 4, 3. There we go. Okay, Bob Sheasley says, North Carolina here. William Nobby says, hi, Jess. Hi, William. Justin Sonder, hi, everybody. And Charles tells me the sound is good, so we're going launch. Okay, so we're going to go over and look at the profile. I'm going to do a little blackboard talk tonight, and we'll kind of go through the idea of what a velocity profile is. That's a big fancy word for speed, and you know, kind of think of it as the flow rates that something can move at naturally in a stream. Okay, so let's go over there. So when we look at a stream like we were showing up there, there was a kind of a section where the stream came in and tended to kind of naturally narrow after it had been going for a while, and then it would open up again and open up again, and then maybe narrow down again. We're looking kind of almost top down. And so what ends up happening in these sections, I'm going to choose a different color here. This is going to be my watercolor color, so you can guess it's blue. So what ends up happening here is that if we draw what are called streamlines, we're going to see that the water flow will tend to concentrate in these areas where the cross section necks down. Now the reason for that is very simple: conservation of mass. So when the water flows down the river, the amount of material has to remain continuous throughout its flow, or it's going to pile up, okay, gain in depth. In the case of a stream, it's pretty much flowing at atmospheric pressures, and it's pretty much flowing kind of at this varying depth and varying width. So what ends up happening is, let's just assume this is all the same depth, as it comes through here, these streamlines have to increase speed. The length of these lines indicates the speed. Boy, they're kind of weird. I changed my mouse and I think I don't like it. A little too responsive. So now, so then when we come out this side, this thing slows down, right? The length of these arrows gets shorter. Why? Because the water's moving less speed in the same time interval. less distance in the same time interval. As it starts to neck down here, it does even more so. Okay, and so pretty much we end up with this really slow moving current in this big pool. And down here, we're going fast again. And so now we have kind of this picture of narrowing and increasing the width of the same depth causes the water to flow, faster. If it increases width, it's going to move slower. Now, if you look closely, you throw a stick or you have something floating downstream, you'll notice something about that profile. I'll get into one part of it in a second because it doesn't all move at the same speed. But you will know in general that if you dropped a stick in, I'm going to change colors again. So let's say you dropped a stick in right here. You might notice that stick move very swiftly through this section and it comes down here in the same amount of time. And then over here, you watch that same stick, and in 5 seconds, it only moves a couple feet because it's just drifting through this section. Up here, it might move 20 feet. It might just shoot down through a chute. So what is going on here? Well, that speed profile I was talking about is playing an important role. What does that do for you in gold, you might ask? Well, gold is going to basically be moved by higher speed flows. So what's going to happen is, if this were a chunk of gold stuck up in here, that chunk of gold is going to get moved through this and tend to concentrate in these areas. And again, it's going to pick up speed and get washed out. It might concentrate finer stuff, but the coarser pieces will be on this upper end here, finer gold here, and the finest gold will tend to get blown out even out of the bottom. It'll just tend to go right on through, but it might concentrate down here, or if there's an eddy, a little pool down here, it might concentrate. But primarily, you're not going to see a whole lot of stuff going on there. Now, that's one kind of flow regime, we call it. So if we were to look at that flow and say instead of going through that narrow section, it went through there, but that narrow section looks something like this on what's called a cross section. Let's say it got really deep and kind of narrowish. And then downstream, so here's our upstream appearance, it narrows down and opens up. Let's say it got real shallow here. Okay? Comparatively. In other words, there's a big old hole down in here. What's going to happen is this area is larger, here's the weird part, than this area. We'll call this B. And the net result is, remember the conservation of mass? Okay? The water has to move through here. If it starts going over a lip or something like that, it's going to increase its speed. Right where I told you it might slow down where everything's even in the same depth, it's going to be speeding up and flowing over. You see this commonly in places where you have big boulders or you have nice big granitic batholiths, things like that can't be carved through, and there might be a waterfall or something that chewed this big hole here in the past, and now it's just a great big pool. So what ends up happening is your gold, because B is moving faster than A now, let's draw that vector. So A is moving slow now, whereas before, because it was narrowing down, it was moving faster, and B speeds up. Completely the flip of what we just talked about. Now, why did that happen? It happened because the depth of B, the cross-sectional area, so depth times width is what we're worried about when it comes to flows. That flow basically has to go through a smaller section and therefore has to speed up to make it over, or it builds up depth, one or the other. And so what we're looking at here is a case where we have kind of an obvious leading edge of what will eventually collect some big boulders and so forth and become essentially what will become a rapids. Okay, and you see this very commonly in a lot of streams where you'll find the stream meanders and all of a sudden it, boom, picks up speed, but it's very shallow and it's just rip-roaring turbulence. Well, guess what's going to happen? Remember we talked about the gold? Well, the gold is going to do something funny here, and that is the gold's going to tend to go into these sections here, and the chunks and the fine are going to concentrate down in the bottom of this thing, and up here this is going to tend to want to blow everything out that's anything smaller than then a pretty big chunk of gold. So you might find under some cobbles and boulders here that are pretty good gold traps, you might find some bigger nuggets, but the rest of your material is going to go right on downstream. Why? Because of that velocity profile. Everything's about the speed. It's not about pressure. It's not about, trying to be fickle and hide from you, although it might feel that way some days. It's about that speed change. And so what happens is you're looking, the key that you're looking for here in all of these cases is, and it really helps sometimes if you can look when the water is moving fast, like in these floods we're having right now. If you can get to where you prospect a lot and get some good footage from a couple of angles without getting anywhere near the river, but maybe from up above at about 45 degrees, and zoom in and hold steady and mark some boulders and stuff. Look at the eddies and flows. Do we have a situation like this one where there's a big pool and things are slowing down in the heavy flows? When it drops into that pool, does it look like it might drop rocks and cobbles to the bottom? This area right in here. If it does, then there's a pretty good chance it's concentrating gold in high flow. If it's speeding up and it seems to be generating a lot of turbulence and foam and maybe some we call them potato patch out here off the coast, but you develop some very turbulent kind of waves, that's going to tend to cause the gold to go right on downstream. And so what ends up happening is, this is the important thing to keep an eye on. The gold is going to move away from there until it can find something. And here's the key. It's not that it won't hide there. It has to have something to shelter it from that turbulence. So look for the boulders, look for the cobbles, cracks, things that might break that flow and shelter the gold, because that gold will tend to, especially if it's heavier gold, it will tend to hang out in that area and look for a shelter and concentrate. And then all the finer stuff will just tend to get blasted downstream, where you might only have fine golds and some of the coarser, kind of material, but it would tend to blow downstream and concentrate somewhere where it gets a lower velocity. So speed is where it's at. I just thought I'd kind of touch on that tonight, and touch on kind of the cross section versus the kind of flow you're typically looking for. That makes life a lot easier to spot when you're looking for gold, and you want to remember that. I mentioned before, we have this 2020 report which talks about water flow and speed and the helical flow effect, and how all that goes into what I call 2020 vision, how to see where gold's going to go in those turbulent flows and how to understand what makes them concentrate. So you'll want to kind of pay attention to that report. That's just a tip of the iceberg kind of report, but it's an important starter piece that I tend to push, because it's one that, when you're looking for placer gold especially, this is the kind of stuff that makes all the difference. It makes you able to kind of find where it's going to land, and that's the important part. Let's see what we got here. Are you going to talk about boilouts? Okay, we talked about boilouts and waterfalls last night, or actually 2 nights ago. And boilouts are basically places where the water turbulence builds so heavily. Now, waterfall is a typical place. You can also get a boilout in a place that doesn't have a waterfall, like where I'm standing here. And you could have a situation where, under the right conditions, there might be some kind of turbulent eddy that flows and rapidly causes material to churn. There actually is. You can't see it behind the dredge here, but there's a situation like that. There's actually a little cliff behind me, and it drops into a bowl, and that area, trust me, has no gold. And so that boiled out. Now, what did it do? Well, it sent the gold downstream around the corner, is what it did. So you have to find that. Now, I'm up here because there's another place similar to this on up above me. And so what I'm doing here is working the piece up behind me. You can see the dredge hose running off the screen to the bottom. Behind me is another spot where there's lots of rocks and cobbles, and very much a picture like what we were talking about, where you have rapids and big cobbles, small cobbles, and traps. That's where that boil out above moved its gold, and so we were working that section. And so that's kind of the thing about boilouts. Dennis says he just bought his first claim in Boulder County. Excited to get out there and start digging. Awesome. Congratulations. Let's see. Justin says, can't wait to start panning. Can't wait to get near the rivers yet. Ice has not let them go. Yep, that's true of a lot of places right now. We had another winter weekend here going on. Here in California, it's been awesome weather, but it it was one of these ones where they said, well, there's a 50% chance of, you know, thunder showers and oh, by the way, sunshine, you know, and it turned out to be the latter, which is kind of nice, because we've been having this alternating stuff all last 3 months now, so it's getting kind of old, but we do need the water, so we're not griping. Okay. So let's see. Are you going to start? Good evening to everybody. Mike Slater is watching. Hey, Mike. Sounds good. Everything looks good. I've got a question. I live in Michigan, and everything I read about says we have no gold. Look up Michigan. I've been walking through the state-by-state march. We're, I think, 30 states into it right now. You know, here's the map. You can't quite see it, but you know, if you look closely, it's got all these check boxes on it, which indicate that we've talked about everything, including Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota. And so check it out. But you'll see it here on Facebook on the Hunting for Gold, FORGOLD page. Like the page, that way you'll get notified when those things go live, and then go over to over to YouTube and Prospector Jess channel. Subscribe to my channel. Two things. One, you'll get notified when we have something get posted, like this thing will get posted in the next day or so. This video we're doing right here and right now, and also Michigan is in there, so go look it up. And that's there's a section there, where is gold found in, so, or gold found in my state. Look it up. Hey, Dennis says, thanks, naming my claim Kicking Cancer Mining. Good for you. Kick it. That's awesome. And Wayne says he's been dredging since 1983. That's a long time, Wayne. Good thing. Stanton, Arizona. Was that at the GPAA, you know, claim, or was that another location? I know they have a, you know, pretty interesting claim out there. A lot of people go out there to get their first education on claims and on dredging, etc. So it's kind of cool. So this is good. I think that's it for tonight. I just thought I'd touch on this subject we have, and the principle of how placer gold relates to water speed, and how slowing down is crucial. So you're looking for speed bumps. That's might be a metaphor that you can think of. Anywhere you get a speed bump or anywhere you get a speed trap, you're going to trap gold. It's going to drop out, and bigger chunks drop earlier than smaller chunks. The speed and the size of the particle are directly connected. It has to do with the amount of friction per amount of mass. Okay, and so that friction on the surface, the smaller it is, the more relative frictional area there is, kind of like an airplane and airfoil. And so the more it has a chance to kind of get pushed downstream a little further than a big chunk that's perfectly spherical and you know, weighs a ton, or better yet, a bullet shaped piece that points upstream. So it has a very, you know, very streamlined appearance. And so that's tends to be what you see when you're first looking at these things, is those big streamlined chunks will tend to be trapped out first in the heaviest flows, and then the smaller particles and things that are a little more flaky and a little more coarse gold looking will be further downstream, and then the flakes and fines will just go until they find some nice quiet place, like you can see me, where the water's just kind of still and settling out. Now this place is still and settling out until this time of year, and then it's roaring, literally. The water flow, you can't quite see it, but you can make out just about right in here. You can see how it has blown through and, you know, across that section. So that to that is the river, and it goes a couple of 100 yards on either side of me. So it becomes a roaring channel of water, and then you can see how it's settled out all these cobbles along in here. That's an indicator, and so what you're looking for is, okay, where the heaviest ones settle out, and it turns out they're right along in here and kind of go upstream from there on. That's why we're dredging. So that's kind of the idea, is you're looking for those speed traps and where you can catch them. So that's it for tonight. Just thought I'd touch bases with you and talk about placer gold and water speed and the connection between the two. Good prospecting, good night, and thanks for joining me again. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow night. Join us, like I said, join the page. Join Prospector Jess on YouTube, and check out sourdoughminer.com for our blogs, huntingforgold.com for our blogs, and both of them have links to our products, and check those out too. Catch you then. Good prospecting. Prospector Jess, over and out.